We just finished learning the first section in the chair, and now that we have ready to go into the first section standing, I would like to show you and talk a little bit about the metrics of balance and a little bit about the joints and the skeleton. Our dear friend, his name is Red Skeleton, and it's wonderful because it has agreed to come here to allow us to show you how really the skeleton look like. So I would like to start by saying that the arms and shoulder girdle, as you know, are really suspended, and here is attached in many different ways to keep it in some way of stance or standing, but in reality it has no life force. So in Unity in Motion, what we're really learning is the tensional forces of the life force that allow us to be three-dimensional, and then that allow us the field of gravity to be the center of the body, at the same time that the center of the body becomes the field of expansion. So the shoulder girdle, as I said, is suspended on top of the rib cage. And the suspension of the shoulder girdle, it comes into existence through the energy that exists in arms and legs, and of course in the whole body, in the spinal column. But I would like to talk a little about the free joints of the arms that we learn a lot of the connections of Unity in Motion and the seated practice in the chair. So the first is, we told you that the arms are three segments connected through the joints as the elbow, wrist, and shoulder. And the connections to the joints is what allow us to sense the feeling of energy that then suspend the shoulder girdle on top of the rib cage. And the suspension of the shoulder girdle on top of the rib cage then allow then the vertebrae of the spine to be without weight of compression and have their own plane of three dimensions in each of the vertebrae, respecting and releasing the curves all the way up to the crown. In the study of Unity in Motion, as we told you, we have three different forms occurring within the arms. We have the diamonds, we have the sphere, and we have the arc. The sphere is what, when we do Earth, for example, the form of the sphere is what allows us to find the polarity of right and left, and then allow us, in relation to the angle in which the sphere is expressed, allow us to experience the balance of right and left that exists right at the center of the chest. We also call that the center of the heart. So we have a sphere, which it takes the form of Earth, or the sphere, which takes the form of the moon. And the sphere of moon is also centralized at the center of the heart, as we know. And then we have the diamond, which is a form, a three-dimensional diamond then that expresses the polarity between right and left, and allow then to experience the balance between the head and the shoulders. In this polarity of extension, then natural extension, then the length of the neck comes into existence through the right and the left and the torso and arms. And that allows us then to allow what we call the crown, which is the natural extension of the body in a vertical direction. Yeah. Now the arc is a little bit more not complex, but it's necessary to express that the arc is the extension of the three segments of the arms at the joints without lacking them. Remember that we said that the opening of the joints is what allows for the energy to pass through and allow the energy, for example, for this to be crown, to be balanced by the extension of the top of the head. And then especially in expansion, that's also understood that it's an arc. And I want you to know that all these connections in expansion, suspended diamond right here, and moon, which is right here, and also the suspended diamond right here, they're true horizontal planes. And what we mean by that is they are true extensions that correspond to the exact center of the horizontal plane within the shoulders. That means that it's not up or it's not down. It's really the clear definition of the right and the left at the center of the chest. Also, as this takes place between the arcs, the spheres, and the diamonds in Unity in Motion, then as the energy becomes clear, extended through the upper torso, then we have the transversal connections. And when we talk about transversal connections, we're saying that the placement of the shoulder connecting the shoulder girdle comes directly from the transversal direction at the center of the hip. The center of the hip being at this point here, that then creates a line between shoulder and hip, and that line of transversal connections allow then from the natural extension of the lumbar curve of the spine, and also the natural release of the front of the spine, because sometimes we just think about what happened in the back of the spine, but we have all this front direction as well, which is allow us, as it is balanced between right and left, to allow each vertebra to have its own angle of 3 dimensions, extended as a spiral all the way to the top of the head. So the transversal connections are the relationship between the arms, hips, and legs, and then at both sides of it. And then we start, of course, we have the right and the left that we just talked about in the shoulders. And then we have the right and the left in the head, which if I take it out right here for a second, you can see this is the atlas in which the right and the left are balanced within the head. So it's important to understand that even though the head is centralized on top of the atlas, has its right and left direction. And that is what we call the vertical extension and the centralization of the head. In the centralization of the head, then, we have the release of the vertebrae of the spine, because that's the farthest point in which the spine is extended. And we have then, let's just put the things together here. And then we have then the farthest definition of the length of the spine, the right and the left within the arms, provided by the 6 joints within the arms. And then we have the pelvis, which is the centralization of the transversals, as well as the centralization of right and left within the legs. The centralization of right and left within the legs occur right here at this point, just in front of the curvature of the lumbar area. The centralization of the solar plexus is right here at the end of the breastbone. The centralization of your heart, as we said before, is right here between the shoulders and the chest. The centralization of the throat is the natural release expressed by the suspension of the shoulders and the centralization of the head. And then we have the right and the left and the head that expresses the crown. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about the centralization of the hips and the joints of the legs. This is very important because now that we're going to practice the standings, practice of unity in motion, the standing in the 0-point stance, it's important to understand that the right and the left of the legs are providing the balance of the hip. And the balance comes as a consequence of the relationship between the 3 segments of the legs. The lower leg, the upper leg, as it is centralized at the hip joint, the lower leg and upper leg as it is centralized at the knee, and the foot and the lower leg as it is centralized in the ankle joint. In the stanza, as we're going to learn in a few moments, then the placement and the natural polarity existing between right and left in the legs determine the spiral nature of the body, defining its vertical extension. So we will become more acquainted with that now, because in the chair, remember we practice in the chair because we don't have to worry where the legs are, other than just place them in a place that we feel the polarity via the floor through the chair. But now that we're standing, we need to go into a little bit more understanding and definition of the polarity of the floor, expressing the extension of the spine and all the forces of balance. So I would like to again express the nature of the metrics, and because it's always wonderful for you to remember that the metrics is something that you develop as you practice the movements, but it's also that you learn them originally through the directions, what we call the directions of balance, and that will help you because then your mental design will begin to match the physical expansion and then the energy of the dimensions. So the first part of the matrix, as we said, is the crown. And then we have the right and the left balancing the head. And then from the center of right and left within the head, we have the transversal connections between head and shoulders, which are suspended, as we said earlier. And that transversal connection giving us then the centralization of the throat and the release of the neck. Then we have the right and the left within the arms and shoulders, and their transversal connection between right shoulder and left hip, left shoulder and arm and right hip, and that transversal connection giving us the solar plexus and the release of the lumbar and cervical foundation from which the spine extends all the way up to the crown. And then we have the right and the left of the pelvis centralized at the pelvic floor, which is the balance existing between right and left of the legs, polarizing the ground. So those are the metrics, and what the metrics does, as they become clear within our awareness, as they become part of our practice, begins to release any angle of compression or opposition existed within the spine. And as the spine becomes clear in his three-dimensional extension, then the metrics become more clear, and so on. So it's like a circle. The metrics release the spine releases the metrics, until eventually it becomes the sensation of you and the definition of your sense of self, of the definition of the physical body. Okay? So then I'd like to show you the whole formation of the vertebrae of the spinal column, and talk about a little bit about the free curves, because whenever there is innocent conversion or compression or opposition, then the curves get a little bit impaired, and when the curves are disturbed, then the three-dimensionality of the whole body energetically becomes also impaired. So in reinstating the curves, we are reinstating the actual strength of our being. And as you know, there are three curves. It's the lumbar curve, make of 5 vertebrae, then it's the thoracic curve, and then it's the cervical curve. So those are all those formations that exist all inside of individual formations of 3 dimensions is what allows them to experience that the spinal column is a spiral. Because remember that when innocently we thought gravity to be postural and be heavy, we all innocently created like a form within our sense of self, and the form also created a lot of compression, as I said, or lack of movement in the vertebrae. So as we regain the movement within the vertebrae, when we regain the sense of suppleness and easiness of movement. All right? So